Ash fell like metallic snowflakes, whispering across the broken spires of Helix Outpost. The sky was too quiet now. No shrieking plasma, no sonic booms, no shrill calls from the Terran war beasts. Just wind. And Jalen hated wind. It got into everything. Your comms, your mouth, your armor joints, especially if you were stupid enough to forget the auxiliary seal like he did. He stepped over what used to be a sentry drone, now melted into a puddle of synth alloy and regret. Smoke curled up from the ground like the ghosts of terrible decisions, and Jalen limped through it with the elegance of a three-legged cargo bot. His left boot squelched, still full of some kind of biogel from the med station's destruction. It smelled faintly of mint. He hated mint. Note to self, he muttered, adjusting his scorched visor. Next time someone yells, "Cover me," don't assume they mean with your face. He tried the comms again. Static. Of course. The blast must have fried the antenna array. Again. He reached for the emergency transponder clipped to his belt. It blinked red once, then let out a sad little chirp, then died. Jalen stared at it. Cool. Very cool. Betrayed by a glorified keychain. That's when he saw the movement. Just beyond the fractured remains of the eastern tower, something shifted through the haze. Jalen dropped behind the husk of a fuel cell, unholstered his pistol, half melted from the heat of the earlier detonation, and held his breath. Footsteps, steady, not limping, not dragging like the brain-eaten grunts of the Zareth shock troops. No growl, no click of exoskeletal armor. Human? No. Taller, sleeker. The silhouette walked through the smoke like it had a personal contract with gravity. As the ash cleared, Jalen's jaw nearly dropped through the floor plating. Sireya. She was alive. Her light blue skin was streaked with soot, her armor cracked down one side and hanging off like a bad cosplay. One gauntlet sparked as she flexed her fingers. Her braids were scorched at the ends, and her left pauldron was completely gone. But her eyes, those impossible violet-ringed eyes, were sharp as ever, watching him. "You're not dead," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You sound disappointed." "No, I just—" He glanced around at the scorched wasteland of the outpost. Figured anyone that stylish would have made a dramatic exit. She tilted her head. "I prefer to disappoint expectations." Jalen stood slowly. "Join the club." They stood there a moment, the last two upright beings in a crater full of melted steel and buried regrets. Then Sireya's gaze dropped to his leg. "You are leaking." He looked down. The cauterized wound in his thigh had opened again, dark red soaking into the fabric of his armor. "Yeah, that's my blood. Not a performance piece." She strode over, her steps somehow both graceful and completely unaffected by the uneven terrain. She knelt beside him and pulled a half-full tube of synth sealant from the tiny medpack clipped to her hip. Without asking, she sprayed it directly onto the wound. It hissed and sizzled. "Ow, okay. What is that?" he barked, twitching like a voltage rat on a capacitor coil. "Military-grade nanosealant, also mildly adhesive." She stood and patted his leg with a firm slap. "Try not to bend." "You just glued my skin shut." "You're welcome." He wobbled upright, testing the leg. It held, barely. "So you're good at first aid, sarcasm, and surviving orbital bombardment. Anything you can't do?" "Appreciate human cuisine." "Fair." They made their way to what remained of the ops shelter. 3 walls, half a roof, and an emergency ration pack that somehow still played cheerful jingles when opened. Sireya peeled back the wrapper on a synth fruit bar and sniffed it. Her expression twisted like she'd just licked a battery. "This tastes like betrayal." "Welcome to the taste of Earth," Jalen grinned, taking a bite of his own. We call that raspberry. They sat in the half-shelter, ash drifting through holes in the ceiling. War had ended here, at least for now. But something else had survived the collapse. Something that hadn't been there before. It was in the way Soraya didn't look away when their eyes met. It was in the way she said, half a breath above silence, "Do you think this is over?" Jalen swallowed the last of his ration bar. The shooting part? Maybe. The weird tension and awkward bonding part? Not a chance. Soraya didn't laugh, but her lips quirked just slightly, like maybe she wanted to. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. Jalen watched her for a while, wondering how someone who looked like a storm could also sit so still. He looked back out at the field of ruin, exhaled long and slow, and muttered, "Yup, definitely gonna need therapy." The fire-retardant blankets were too small for alien shoulders and too scratchy for human skin, but they made do. Jalen had fashioned a makeshift camp inside the half-shelled comms hub, and by fashioned, he meant he found a corner where the wind only slapped them in the face every third gust. He'd dragged over a busted decon panel to act as a windbreak and used a broken antenna rod to prop up the half-collapsed roof. It leaned like a drunk soldier, but didn't fall. Yet. "You know," he said, chewing the last of a meal cube that claimed to be chicken teriyaki, but tasted suspiciously like sadness. "If someone had told me I'd be cuddling up in a war zone with an alien war maiden after an orbital strike, I'd have asked for a refund on my career counseling." Soraya didn't respond immediately. She was crouched near what passed for a heat source, an overheated drone core balanced on a rock, and trying to recharge her armor's interface gauntlet using exposed wires and what looked like a piece of her earring. Jalen watched her with a mix of admiration and apprehension. She worked with the precision of a neurosurgeon and the attitude of someone who could break him in half using only her stare. "You do realize you're committing high-voltage flirting," he added, eyeing the sparks. She didn't look up. "If this explodes, I expect you to catch the pieces." "I'll be sure to scream romantically." A small zap flared and the gauntlet's status light blinked to life. She allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction before sitting back, legs folded like a meditation monk. She finally glanced at him. "Why did you stay behind?" Jalen blinked. "What? During the retreat?" "Yes." "Well," he shifted, the armor on his side squeaking in protest. "I could say I was being noble. Defending the rear line, sacrificing for the greater mission. But truth is, I misread the evac timing by 2 hours. Soraya stared at him. "What? The encryption format was in decimal time. You missed evacuation because you couldn't convert base 12? Technically, yes, but in my defense, nobody uses base 12. It's a cursed number system. We do. And how's that working out for you?" She didn't smile. Not fully. But her lips twitched again, and her eyes lingered on his just a second too long. Then she shifted the topic with surgical bluntness. "Your leg, still bleeding?" He wiggled his toes. "Still attached, so I call that a win." She slid closer and took his boot off without asking. The pressure release made him gasp, then wince. His sock was soaked, the wound having reopened during their earlier climb. Soraya removed another synth seal capsule from her belt. "This will sting. You aliens have a real gift for understatement." He yelped as the gel hissed across his skin. She held his foot steady, her grip stronger than it had any right to be. "Done," she said. "Try walking tomorrow, not tonight." "Yes, ma'am," he saluted dramatically, earning an eye roll. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft beeping of the half-dead drone core and the occasional creak from the stressed structure above them. Eventually, Jalen broke it. "You know what I miss?" Soraya raised an eyebrow. "Hot showers. Not sonic showers. Not recycled steam chambers. Real, water-wasting, environmentally irresponsible hot showers. With pressure so strong it could strip paint off a ship." She tilted her head, thinking. "We have sonic mist baths. Efficient. Frictionless. That's the problem," he said. "You haven't lived until you've been pelted with angry water molecules." She stared at him like he'd just confessed to drinking engine coolant. "I'm serious," he said. "Also, burgers. You ever had a cheeseburger?" "I once consumed a spherical protein composite infused with molten dairy cultures." "That sounds like a crime against language, but yes, that's close." Jalen leaned back against the wall, wincing slightly. "So, what about you? What do you miss from your world?" Soraya was quiet for a long time. Then, "Home wind." He frowned. "What's that?" "It's warm. Always from the east. It smells like metal trees and ground-light moss." "That actually sounds weirdly nice." "It hums through your bones," she added, closing her eyes. "Like it's speaking, reminding you you're still part of something bigger." Jalen tried to picture it. He couldn't, but he nodded anyway. "Tell me more," he said softly. And for the next hour, she did. Her voice was calm, her words strange, and her memories sharp-edged with longing. Jalen listened, not because he understood, but because it was the first time she talked like someone who hadn't come here to die. The day began with an explosion. Technically, it was a pressure burst from the collapsed hydro conduit running beneath the comms hub, but Jalen screamed like it was a full orbital strike. Soraya didn't even flinch, just raised one elegant eyebrow as he scrambled backward and fell on his injured leg with a squeal. "Enemy attack," he groaned, clutching his thigh. "I've been targeted by infrastructure." "Relax," she said, glancing at the now hissing pipe. "It's just the hydration system collapsing under your poor engineering choices." "You're blaming me for the ground blowing up?" "You propped a heating core over it." "I was cold." "You're still warm." "It worked." Jalen grunted and rolled onto his side, glaring at the debris like it owed him money. His entire right leg was soaked with something between water and mineral oil, and it smelled faintly of boiled algae. "Great," he muttered. "Now I smell like your home wind's drunk uncle." Soraya finally stood, surveying the surrounding wreckage. The comms tower they had hoped to reach was less than half a click away, its skeletal frame poking through the gray fog like a warning finger. Between them and it, twisted girders, unstable terrain, and a hungry-looking field of plant life that hadn't been there the night before. Jalen narrowed his eyes at the glimmering red vines now spreading across the rubble. That wasn't part of the tour package." Soraya crouched, brushing a finger near the edge of the plant field. The vines retreated slightly. "Photosensitive. Possibly xenobiotic. Not native to this sector." "That's code for weird alien nonsense that might eat us, right?" "Correct." "Well, I left my flamethrower in my other pants," Jalen said, tugging on his boot. "So unless you've got some secret anti-plant spray, we're taking the scenic route." Soraya pulled a spherical device from her belt, metallic, palm-sized, and blinking a slow, amber pulse. "Atmospheric shifter. It releases a compression wave tuned to disrupt low-root oxygen sensors. May clear a path." Jalen blinked. "You carry around an alien weed killer?" "I carry around solutions. You carry sarcasm and meat sticks." "Hey, those meat sticks are 90% protein and 10% hope." She activated the device and tossed it toward the vine cluster. It landed with a dull thud, then pulsed once. A soft hum followed, then a concussive pop that kicked up dust and sent the vines writhing back into their burrows like offended cats. Jalen whistled. Okay, that was cool. You sure you're not secretly part ninja? Ninjas do not exist. Exactly what a ninja would say. They moved out, picking their way carefully through the newly cleared path. The air here had changed, heavier, more humid. A distant hum vibrated faintly underfoot, like the remnants of an old reactor struggling to remember its job. Do you feel that? Jalen asked, tapping the side of his boot. Yes, seismic frequency inconsistent with local tectonics. Soraya pointed ahead. Residual power source, possibly from the tower's backup core. Do you think it's still broadcasting? Doubtful. Wanna bet dinner on it? If you mean those protein sticks, no. He grinned and pushed ahead. The tower base was covered in soot and dotted with craters, but the lower panel was intact. Jalen wiped grime from the control pad and tapped in a boot code. The screen flickered. Hey, we got juice! Soraya peered over his shoulder. Minimal power, just enough for data access. I'll take it, he muttered, scrolling through half-burned logs. Okay, looks like someone tried to activate an evac beacon last night. Did they succeed? Nope. Power surge fried the uplink. He looked over at her. Want to fix it? Soraya didn't answer right away. She stepped into the console chamber and pulled her gauntlet free. Give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes? He asked, skeptical. And no distractions. Too late, he said, flopping onto a pile of loose insulation foam. I'm basically a professional distraction. She didn't even glance back. 4 minutes later, the beacon pinged. Low power. Weak signal. But it was something. Jalen stared at the blinking green light. Well, I'll be damned. Soraya turned back toward him, her expression unreadable. We could leave, he said. Actually make it out. She nodded slowly. Or, he trailed off. Soraya folded her arms. Or, Jalen grinned. Or we could pretend this is all part of a really slow, elaborate date. She tilted her head, amused despite herself. I do not recall agreeing to a courtship ritual in a hostile plant zone. Hey, if you didn't say no, that's a technical maybe. She looked at him for a long time, then walked past, brushing his shoulder lightly as she passed. Let's survive the night first, she said. Then we'll renegotiate terms. Jalen woke to the sound of something humming. It wasn't the comforting whir of working tech, nor the menacing pulse of a weapon charging. It was tuneless, organic, like someone humming a lullaby and forgetting half the notes. He blinked sleep out of his eyes and rolled toward the source. Soraya sat by the beacon, her fingers fiddling with a busted transmitter coil like it was a puzzle cube. Her voice wasn't trained, but it was steady. Low and strange, something between a hum and a chant. Her eyes were distant, her brow furrowed in thought. Are you singing? She froze. No, she said, because it sounded suspiciously like you were. I was adjusting vocal frequency for focus. Right, he said, stretching, and I eat 5 chocolate bars a day for digestive balance. You do? Let's not get bogged down in the details. She returned to the coil, but he saw the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Progress. He stood and tested his leg. Better. Not good. Still hurt like hell if he moved wrong, but he was down to limping like a tragic hero instead of a disaster survivor. He'd take it. Signals holding? He asked, nodding at the blinking beacon. Stable, but weak. It will not penetrate the upper ionosphere. So we're still stuck. For now. He rubbed the back of his neck. Well, it's not the worst place I've been stranded. Soraya tilted her head. You've been stranded before. Oh, yeah. Once spent 4 days on a mining moon with nothing but a malfunctioning translator and an angry squirrel bird that kept trying to mate with my helmet. She stared. I don't want to talk about it, he added quickly. Probably for the best. They spent the morning scavenging. Soraya found a functioning solar cell buried beneath half a wall, and Jalen discovered that chewing on old rations after 3 days of ash exposure was an excellent way to hallucinate your grandmother piloting a gunship. By midday, they had pieced together a semi-functional power coupling and 3 moderately offensive jokes involving Terran mating customs. The laughter helped. It didn't fix anything, but it made the silence less heavy. Around mid-afternoon, as they cleared rubble from the perimeter, Jalen pointed toward the old mech carcass near the eastern ridge. That thing still gives me the creeps. Soraya looked over. The mech was a downed model, heavy armor, dual rotary cannons, the kind they used in the first wave of defense. Burned out, half buried in slag, its torso slumped like a corpse watching the horizon. I fought beside that machine, she said quietly. Jalen blinked. Really? She nodded. It was piloted by Commander Velis. He refused to retreat. His last words were, "If this is the end, let it be loud." Respect, Jalen said, bowing his head. Then, after a beat, also dramatic much. Soraya's expression softened. It was tradition. Loud deaths meant the stars would remember you. He looked at her sideways. You ever plan on dying loud? No. Why not? She shrugged. I would prefer to live quietly. He grinned. You sure picked the wrong war for that. She didn't argue. They sat against the mech's remains, catching their breath. The metal under their backs was cold but oddly comforting, like sitting with a ghost that had made peace with its story. Soraya shifted. You asked me before. Why I was fighting. Why I stayed. He didn't move. I wasn't ordered to. I disobeyed a retreat signal. My commander didn't know I was still on the surface. Why? She didn't answer right away. Then, I saw you. Jalen turned to her slowly. You were downed. 5 units surrounded you. You kept firing anyway, poorly. I was buying time for a medic team. You didn't know the medic team was already dead. He blinked. Oh. She looked at him. I thought it was foolish, brave, infuriating. And? I wanted to know what kind of creature would fight a war with that much recklessness and that little aim. Harsh. Accurate. He chuckled. Then she leaned forward, voice dropping to almost a whisper. Do you want me now or later? The words hit like a seismic pulse, silent and shaking everything loose inside him. Jalen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? Her eyes didn't waver. It's what your soldiers say, isn't it? When flirting. He blinked. Sometimes. Yes, but… I'm learning your customs, she said. Was that improper? No, it was very accurate and direct. Very direct. I just wasn't expecting… She stood, brushing dust from her armor. Then I said it correctly. And she walked off to check the perimeter, leaving Jalen with his jaw slightly unhinged and his heart very confused. The next morning, Jalen pretended to be deeply invested in recalibrating a proximity scanner just to avoid eye contact. Soraya, to her credit, said nothing about the whisper from the day before. She moved with her usual smooth precision, checking equipment, reinforcing their shelter's outer walls, and occasionally muttering sharp phrases in her language that Jalen was starting to interpret as either engineering terms or insults directed at gravity. He'd slept exactly 0 hours. Every time he'd closed his eyes, that question echoed through his head like an alert from a broken console. Do you want me now or later? It wasn't just the words. It was the way she'd said them. like she was testing him, or teasing him, or maybe asking a question with an answer she already knew. He had no idea if she meant it as a joke, a challenge, or something else entirely. And now his brain was chewing on it like it owed rent. "So," he said casually, voice a touch too high, "I'm guessing alien courtship protocols don't include slow walks on the beach?" Soraya glanced over. "Our oceans are corrosive and contain hunting spores." "Romantic," he said. "I can see the tourism brochure already. Come for the acid rain, stay for the screaming plankton." She didn't smile, but her eyes sparkled just slightly. "Your people's idea of romance involves food with melting dairy and simulated violence on viewing screens. We like our emotional bonding with side orders of cholesterol and explosions." He finally got the scanner to power up, though it immediately displayed an angry warning in 5 dialects and began clicking like a Geiger counter on caffeine. "Okay, that's either enemy movement or there's a nest of hyperactive mineral rats under us." Soraya checked the screen. Organic trace patterns, movement approximately 200 meters west. Low aggression signature, possibly scavengers. Jalen tapped the screen. Or really polite assassins. They're not approaching. Because they're shy. Or playing the long game. He grabbed his rifle anyway, even though its power cell was running on fumes, and he'd once accidentally reversed the polarity mid-recharge. It still worked, just not always the way he intended. Last week, it had ignited a shrub 3 meters behind him during a forward shot. That shrub had not deserved it. Soraya looked over. "If they attack, you should aim slightly left. You tend to overcompensate. You make it sound like I'm bad at this. You're good at improvising, less good at aiming. I'll have you know I once hit a moving target at 400 meters. Was it trying to dodge? It was asleep. I see." They took positions near the collapsed entry arch, watching for movement. The scanner's ping grew softer, then silent. After 5 long minutes, Jalen finally broke the tension. "You know," he said, "I'm starting to think that if the enemy doesn't kill us, awkward flirting might." Soraya didn't respond immediately. Then, very calmly, "You have not flirted. You have made noises and avoided eye contact. Hey, that's the human method. It's a rich cultural tradition of poorly timed jokes and deep personal denial." She turned slightly toward him, her voice level. "You still haven't answered." He blinked. "Answered what?" She held his gaze. "Now or later?" Jalen opened his mouth, then shut it again. For a long second, they just stared at each other. He started. "I was waiting for the right time." "There is no right time," she said. "Just time you waste." He swallowed. She stood, brushing her hands together. "We should scan the ridge. The power signature near the relay might have shifted." He watched her walk away, the question still hanging in the air like static waiting for a spark. He muttered under his breath, "If she says something like that again, I might actually combust." Then the scanner beeped once, softly, and his heart did the same. They found the turret by accident. Jalen was in the middle of explaining why Earth's best invention was cheese in a can, complete with hand gestures and increasingly vivid metaphors, when the ground beeped. Not a soft, friendly beep. This was the kind of beep that meant something nearby had just decided you were a viable target. Soraya froze mid-step. That is a sentry warning. Jalen raised both hands instinctively, scanning the horizon. "You think it's one of ours? Number ours don't beep." "Oh, cool. I love learning things right before I die." The turret rose from beneath the rubble like an angry god. 3 legs, rusted plating, and a targeting array that sparked like it had woken up in a bad mood. Its red sensor swiveled toward them, blinking with the intensity of someone who hadn't slept in weeks and really wanted to shoot something. Jalen did the only reasonable thing. He screamed, "Move!" and dove behind a boulder the size of an enthusiastic refrigerator. Plasma bolts scorched the air a breath behind him. Soraya rolled in the opposite direction, her armor catching one of the glancing bursts with a loud hiss. She landed on her back, sliding down a slope of debris before vanishing behind a slab of carbon steel. Jalen peeked over his rock just long enough to catch another bolt burn past his nose. "I don't suppose you've got a magic alien word for deactivate?" There was a moment's pause. Then Soraya's voice came from somewhere below. "I may be able to override it." Jalen risked another glance. "How?" There was a sharp clatter, and then her helmet appeared, held up on a stick like a peace offering. The turret paused, scanned, hesitated. Soraya yelled, "It is an old model. Pre-AI fusion. It still operates on heuristic memory trees." Translation? "I can confuse it." Jalen blinked. "What, like insult its ancestors?" Number I will recite pre-colonial Terran logic riddles. "You're gonna bore it into submission?" "It worked on my instructors." She stood slowly, her arms raised. The turret tracked her, but didn't fire. Instead, it emitted a confused trill, like a dog hearing a harmonica for the first time. Soraya began to speak in her native tongue, measured, rhythmic phrases that sounded like music translated into math. The turret pulsed once, then again. It tilted its head, then spun in a slow, confused circle. Jalen gaped. "It's working!" "I told you." The turret began to spark, then whined, and with a soft, almost pathetic puff of steam, it collapsed into itself. Power core drained, and logic looped into a coma. Jalen emerged from behind the boulder, wide-eyed. "You weaponized your culture's math homework." Soraya tapped the dead turret with her foot. "Riddles are powerful." "I'm never mocking algebra again." They climbed up to the turret's base, where a fused panel glowed dimly with residual energy. "This thing's still connected," Jalen said, brushing soot from the interface. "I might be able to piggyback a signal burst through its uplink stub." Soraya handed him a power converter from her kit. "Combine this with your scanner's comm relay. Recalibrate to frequency delta 7.4. He blinked. "You just carry all this stuff around?" "I am prepared." He started wiring the pieces together. "You know, if we survive this, I'm going to make you a utility belt." "Why?" "Because you're basically a one-woman supply depot. You deserve accessories." She watched him for a moment, then said quietly, "You do not mock my skills." He glanced up. "Why would I?" "Most humans do. They fear what they do not understand." "I'm scared of you," he said, "but not because I don't understand you. I'm scared because you keep doing terrifyingly competent things while I'm over here duct taping a radio together with chewing gum and optimism." She smiled. Barely, but it was real. The uplink pinged. Jalen stared at it. "I think it's working." "Then send the signal." He hesitated. Soraya frowned. "What is it?" He looked at her. "If we send this, someone's coming. That means this," he gestured between them, "might be over." She stepped closer. "Then wait," she said softly. "A little longer." He nodded, and for one more heartbeat, they let the silence stretch before everything changed. The sky shimmered with heat as the evac ship descended through the dust clouds like a silver ghost finally showing up to its own funeral. Jalen stood at the ridge with his hands in his pockets, helmet clipped to his belt, armor singed in too many places to count. He squinted up at the blinking lights of the craft and muttered, "Only 2 days late." I've had pizza deliveries with better punctuality. Soraya stood beside him, arms crossed. Her armor had been patched in a dozen places, her gauntlet still flickering from the jury-rigged uplink they'd used to send the rescue signal. She said nothing at first, just watched the ship settle into the dirt, like a weary animal. Standard transport, she finally noted. No med teams. No gun turrets. Guess they figured anyone alive down here wasn't worth shooting, Jalen said. Progress. The loading ramp hissed open, revealing a very confused corporal holding a clipboard and blinking like he'd just walked in on someone else's dream. Jalen raised a hand. Hi, 2 survivors, 1 half-human disaster and 1 very unimpressed alien diplomat. Do you have snacks? The corporal stared. We thought everyone down here was dead. Jalen gestured dramatically. And yet, here we are. Breathing. Sarcastic. Slightly radioactive. The corporal looked to Soraya. She said nothing, just lifted her chin in that way that made people rethink their life choices. He stepped back. We can load you up now. Jalen didn't move. Soraya glanced at him. He looked down at his boots, scuffed and burned, and suddenly felt the weight of something he hadn't acknowledged since the first explosion. He wasn't the same guy who'd crash-landed into this mess with a scanner, a bad attitude, and 3 meat sticks for company. I'm not going, he said. The corporal blinked. You're... what? Jalen shrugged. Not right away. Someone's got to make sure the beacon keeps pinging until they get full coverage down here. There's still wounded units out there, scavenger nests, and I know how to operate a half-melted turret now, so, you know, I'm basically a local. Soraya raised an eyebrow. You intend to remain? Temporarily. He looked at her. Unless you were planning on running off without a goodbye. She was silent for a long breath. Then she stepped closer. I was planning to leave, she said, but I find I dislike the idea of repeating myself. Meaning? I stayed once because I saw you. And now? She looked him directly in the eye. Now I stay because I want to. They didn't kiss. No dramatic music swelled. The corporal cleared his throat awkwardly and wandered back up the ramp. Jalen turned to her. So, do we just keep camping here like a pair of rogue weirdos? I'd propose we call it forward reconnaissance. Fancy. I like it. They set up a new post using the remnants of the comms tower and some leftover shielding plates. It wasn't much, but it had shelter, signal, and Soraya's terrifying ability to fry old tech back to life with poetry and wiring. Days passed, then weeks. The war didn't return, and neither did the silence. They took in 2 wounded scouts, patched up a supply drone, and convinced a passing AI salvage unit to donate a thermal blanket by teaching it how to gamble. Jalen taught Soraya how to play cards. She beat him 9 times in a row before admitting she'd already learned by observing his hand twitches. He didn't mind. Some nights, they sat by the old turret's remains and stared up at the stars. Not as soldiers. Not as enemies. Just 2 survivors who had run out of reasons to run. And when the wind picked up, brushing the dust aside like fingers through sand, Jalen would glance at her and ask, "Now or later?" And she would always smile, just a little. "Later," she'd say. But they both knew what she really meant.